After my husband's affair, his mistress's husband came to me and said, "I'm worth 9 figures. Just nod and tomorrow we marry at City Hall." He wasn't joking. When the divorce papers landed on the table in front of me, I laughed because I thought it was a joke. The papers were dated a week before I even knew they existed. I was staring at page 5 of Alexander Sterling's file, a notarized final judgment of dissolution stamped with the crimson seal of the New York County Supreme Court, when I realized my entire marriage had been a calculated heist, the kind where the victim doesn't know they've been robbed until the thief is already spending their money in public. 30 feet away, across a garden cafe in Soho, my husband Kevin was kissing another man's wife on the forehead, tenderly, like he owned her. Like he hadn't just stolen 10 years of my life savings to build a construction empire, he was now legally forbidden from sharing with me, because I'd signed it all away, like an idiot. "Have you seen enough?" The voice came from directly above me, deep and cold as a frozen lake. I looked up into the face of Alexander Sterling, chairman of Sterling Logistics, maritime shipping magnate, and the husband of the woman currently giggling into Kevin's neck like a teenager. He didn't ask permission before sitting down. Men like Alexander Sterling don't ask for space. They take it. He pushed the file closer to me with one finger. "Your husband is spending my money," he said, voice flat as a quarterly earnings report, "and he's already paved the way to erase you entirely." I'd been a senior audit manager at Morrison & Blake for 8 years when Kevin first pitched me his dream. We were 28, newly married, living in a shoebox apartment in Queens where you could hear the neighbors sneeze through the walls. He'd been working construction since college, good with his hands, better with people, the kind of guy who could talk a building inspector into approving anything. "I want to start my own company," he told me one night, eyes bright with ambition I found intoxicating. "I've got the connections. I've got the experience. I just need capital." I was making $140,000 a year. I had stock options, a 401k that would have set me up for early retirement, a career trajectory that looked like a straight lineup. But I looked at Kevin, at the way he smiled when he talked about building something from nothing, and I made a choice. I liquidated everything, $280,000, every penny I'd saved through brutal tax seasons and weekend overtime and saying no to brunches and vacations and anything that wasn't building my future. I handed it to him in a wire transfer that took 4 minutes to complete and said, "Build something beautiful." He did. Reed Construction Solutions took off faster than either of us expected. Within 3 years, we had 12 employees, contracts with 3 major developers, and a brownstone in Park Slope that I'd picked out myself. Kevin was good at what he did, legitimately good. He had a gift for reading blueprints like poetry and charming clients into signing contracts they hadn't planned on signing. We were supposed to start trying for kids that year. Instead, I got postnuptial papers. It was a Tuesday night when Kevin sat me down at our kitchen table, the marble-topped island I'd chosen from a catalog, the one that cost $8,000 and made me feel like we'd finally made it, and told me we were facing financial ruin. "Ava." His voice cracked in all the right places, hitting every note of desperation I was trained to hear. "The company's in trouble. Legal trouble. If we don't restructure immediately, we could lose everything." My stomach dropped. The money I'd given him wasn't just mine. It was my entire 20s. Every hour I'd spent proving myself in rooms full of men who assumed I'd gotten my CPA license by accident. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, already running calculations, bankruptcy timelines, asset protection strategies, ways to salvage what we'd built together. Kevin slid a stack of papers across the table. "Post-nuptial agreement." The words were dense, legal, designed to intimidate anyone who wasn't a lawyer. But I was a CPA. I could read contracts. I just couldn't read my husband. "The new property development needs to be under my name only to secure the loan," he explained, eyes wet with what I thought was genuine fear. "If we're still legally tied if the company goes under, the bank will seize everything. The house, our savings, everything you've worked for. This way, your assets are protected." Protected. The word felt like a life raft, like something a responsible husband would do to shelter his wife from disaster. "It's just temporary," he promised, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "As soon as we're through this, I'll reverse it all. I swear, Ava, I'm doing this to protect you." I believed him because I loved him, because we'd built a life together, because the alternative, that the man I'd sacrificed everything for was lying to my face, was too painful to consider. I signed on page 12, then page 18, then page 24. I signed away my rights to our home, our savings, our shared future, because the man I'd married asked me to trust him one more time. I shouldn't have. The first red flag came 3 weeks later when I found a receipt in Kevin's car, $340 at Oriole, a restaurant we'd never been to together. I told myself it was a client dinner, something work-related he'd forgotten to mention. Kevin was busy, stressed. It made sense that he'd forget to tell me about a business meal, but I'm a CPA. I'm trained to notice patterns, and the pattern was becoming clear. He started coming home later, smelling different. Not bad, just different. Jasmine and something expensive I didn't recognize. When I asked where he'd been, he had answers ready. Always believable. Always delivered with just enough detail to sound true. Meeting with the contractor for the Williamsburg project. Drinks with the investors. You know how they are. Had to schmooze. Site inspection ran late. You know how it is. I did know. I'd worked in corporate finance long enough to know that business dinners and late meetings were normal. Expected even. But my gut knew something else, so I followed him. I'm not proud of it. I'm a 32-year-old woman with a graduate degree and a professional reputation, and I followed my husband like some kind of desperate housewife in a bad Lifetime movie, but I needed to know. I needed proof that I was wrong, that the sinking feeling in my stomach was just paranoia. That's how I ended up huddled in a secluded corner of a garden cafe in Soho, hidden behind a thicket of ferns, watching my husband hold another woman's hand. The woman was Melanie Sterling. I knew exactly who she was. Anyone in New York logistics knew Melanie, wife of Alexander Sterling, chairman of Sterling Logistics, one of the largest maritime shipping companies on the East Coast. She was the kind of woman whose name traveled ahead of her into rooms like expensive perfume, old money, connected, dangerous. She wore a red silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, cut to make men forget they had wives waiting at home. Kevin was smiling at her. It was the same smile he'd given me when we first met, the one that had convinced me, Ava Reed, rigid and disciplined and pathologically risk-averse, to bet my entire future on him. Now that smile belonged to someone else. My hands were shaking. My Arnold Palmer had gone warm, the ice melted into watery separation, lemonade and iced tea forming distinct layers like my life had separated into before and after, without my permission. I watched Kevin lean forward and kiss Melanie's forehead, intimate, possessive, like he'd already decided I was a finished chapter. That's when Alexander Sterling sat down across from me. He didn't ask permission, didn't introduce himself, just pulled out the chair opposite mine and sat, radiating the kind of authority that comes from spending decades telling people what to do and watching them do it. "Have you seen enough?" he asked. His voice was deep, controlled, empty of emotion. He could have been asking about the weather. I stared at him. Alexander Sterling was exactly what you'd expect from a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Tall, angular, expensive suit tailored to mathematical precision. His eyes were the coldest thing I'd ever seen, like looking into a frozen lake in January. He placed a thick file on the table between us. The sound of paper hitting wood was sharp and final, like a gavel. "Your husband is spending my money," Alexander said, voice flat as a quarterly report. "And he's already paved the way to kick you to the curb." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. Alexander pushed the file toward me with one finger. "Page 5, he said. "Have a look." My hands were trembling as I opened it. Page 5 was a notarized copy of the final judgment of dissolution of marriage, dated 1 week ago. The crimson seal of the New York County Supreme Court sat there like a brutal punctuation mark on my life. 1 week. Kevin had finalized our divorce a week ago, and I hadn't known. How is this possible? My voice cracked. He said he hadn't filed yet. He said he was waiting until after the financial crisis. Alexander's expression didn't change. "He filed it the day you signed," he said. "And because you signed an agreement waiving all claims to marital assets, you are, from a legal standpoint, left with nothing." Nothing. The word hit me like a physical blow. "The house you live in," Alexander continued, voice clinical and precise, "the car you drive, even the money from your joint savings account that you gave him to invest, it all legally belongs to him now." I dropped the file. Couldn't hold it anymore. My hands wouldn't work. 10 years. 10 years of my life, my youth, my savings, my faith in basic human decency. Gone. Stolen by the man I'd shared a bed with for a decade. I was Ava Reed, top certified CPA, recruited by Fortune 500 companies, smart enough to audit billion-dollar corporations, and I'd been swindled by my own husband. It was the worst calculation of my life, and the cost was everything. Alexander watched me with those frozen eyes, assessing my reaction like I was a quarterly earnings report, calculating whether I was worth the investment. "Anguish doesn't solve problems," he said finally. "You're a finance professional. You understand cutting your losses better than anyone. That investment has been written off. It's time to think about restructuring." I forced myself to breathe, forced my hands to stop shaking. I smoothed my hair, straightened the collar of my blouse like posture could remind my body who I was. "You didn't seek me out just to inform me I'm a failure," I said, voice steadying. "Did you, Mr. Sterling?" A corner of his mouth twitched upward. Approval, almost. Very sharp. He leaned forward slightly. "Legally, you are now a single woman," he said. "I have also finalized my divorce from Melanie, but she was more cunning than you. She still holds significant financial power in my company because asset division is still in litigation." His eyes didn't flick toward the koi pond table where Kevin and Melanie sat, but I felt the direction of his hatred anyway. "She has people in my accounting department siphoning funds from the corporation to support your ex-husband," Alexander continued. "I need someone I can trust, someone with the professional expertise to audit my entire system and stop the flow of illicit money Melanie is funneling out." He paused just long enough to make sure I understood the shape of what he was offering. "I need a legal wife to replace her," he said, "to use that authority to clean house." My brain, trained through years of complex audits and financial analysis, snapped into motion. Numbers, flows, motives, access. "Why me?" I asked, though I was already calculating the angles. Alexander didn't blink. "First, you have motive. You despise Kevin and Melanie." I didn't deny it. "Second, your resume is impeccable. Former senior audit manager for a major retail conglomerate, CPA certified. Reputation as an iron fist in cost control." My spine straightened despite myself. "Third," he said, and his gaze sharpened, "neither of us has any faith left in love. We can collaborate based on mutual interest." He looked me straight in the eye and delivered his final offer like a contract clause. "If you agree, be at the city clerk's office tomorrow at 8 a.m. We're getting married." I glanced toward table 6. Kevin was kissing Melanie's forehead again, smug, victorious, like he'd already won. He thought I was done. He thought I'd go home and cry into a pillow he legally owned. He thought I'd beg. I turned back to Alexander. 3 seconds. seconds. That's all the time I needed to decide on the biggest gamble of my life. I had already lost everything. I had nothing left to fear. Done, I said, voice firm. I agree. Then I added, because I was still Ava Reed even with my world burning. But I have one condition. Alexander's expression didn't change. I want full unilateral control over Sterling Logistics' finance department, I said. You are not to interfere with how I work. Alexander stood, buttoning his suit jacket with calm finality. I'll see you tomorrow, Mrs. Sterling. I showed up at the Manhattan Marriage Bureau at 7:43 a.m., wearing a navy suit I'd bought for a board presentation 3 years ago. No white dress, no flowers, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was, a business transaction. Alexander was already there, standing near the entrance in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He looked at me with those cold, assessing eyes and gave a single nod. You came, he said. I gave my word, I replied. We filled out the paperwork in silence. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Chen with 23 years of experience according to her nameplate, barely looked up as she processed our application. Witnesses? She asked. Alexander gestured to two people I hadn't noticed, a severe-looking woman in her 50s and a younger man in an expensive suit. Catherine Morris, General Counsel for Sterling Logistics, the woman said. And this is James Park, CFO. They signed where Patricia indicated. The whole thing took 11 minutes. When Patricia said, you may kiss, Alexander and I looked at each other for exactly 1 second before I said, we'll pass. Patricia stamped the certificate anyway. Mrs. Ava Sterling. The name felt like a weapon. Cars outside, Alexander said, and I followed him to a black Mercedes S-Class that probably cost more than I'd made in 2 years at Morrison & Blake. We drove to Sterling Logistics headquarters in Midtown in silence. The building was glass and steel, 47 stories of maritime shipping dominance, rising above 6th Avenue like a middle finger to every competitor who'd ever tried to challenge Alexander Sterling's empire. Inside, the lobby was all marble and recessed lighting. People in expensive suits moved with purpose. Alexander's presence created a wake. Employees stepping aside, straightening their posture, suddenly remembering urgent tasks that required their immediate attention elsewhere. We took a private elevator to the 43rd floor. This is your office, Alexander said, opening a door to a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The desk was solid mahogany. The computer was already set up, dual monitors displaying the Sterling Logistics login screen. Catherine will brief you on current financial structure, he continued. James will provide you with full access to all accounts, ledgers, and transaction records for the past 18 months. I want you to find every penny Melanie's stolen. I sat down at the desk. The chair was leather, ergonomic, probably cost $3,000. It felt like coming home. I'll need complete autonomy, I said. If I find something, I act on it. No running decisions past you. No committee approvals. Alexander's mouth twitched. You'll have it. And I want it in writing. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and 30 seconds later, my email pinged. I opened it on the computer. A memo from Alexander Sterling, Chairman and CEO, to all Sterling Logistics personnel. Effective immediately, Ava Sterling has been appointed Chief Financial Officer with full unilateral authority over all financial operations, audits, and personnel decisions within the finance department. All inquiries regarding financial matters are to be directed to CFO Sterling. My office will not entertain appeals or override her decisions. I read it twice. Satisfied? Alexander asked. It's a start. He almost smiled. Almost. I have a board meeting. Catherine and James are waiting in the conference room. He paused at the door. Welcome to Sterling Logistics, Mrs. Sterling. The door closed behind him. I sat in my new office, in my new life, with my new name, and allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to feel the weight of what I'd just done. Then I opened the financial files and got to work. Catherine Morris was exactly as severe in person as she'd appeared at the Marriage Bureau. She walked me through the corporate structure with military precision, wholly owned subsidiaries, joint ventures, shell companies used for international tax optimization, legal but complex, the kind of complexity that created opportunities for theft if you knew where to look. Melanie still holds 8.3% of company stock from the marriage, Catherine explained, pulling up a spreadsheet. She also maintained relationships with several employees in accounting and procurement. We've suspected irregularities for months, but couldn't prove anything without triggering her legal team. And now? I asked. Now you have spousal authority to access accounts she can't block, Catherine said. And as CFO, you can audit anything without justification. James Park was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with wire-rimmed glasses and the slightly haunted look of someone who'd been cleaning up someone else's mess for too long. I've been trying to track the discrepancies for 6 months, he admitted, pulling up transaction logs. But every time I got close, the trail went cold. Someone was tipping her off. Someone in your department? I asked. I think so, but I can't prove which one. I studied the transactions. Wire transfers to vendor accounts, consulting fees, equipment purchases, all perfectly normal on the surface. But I'd been auditing corporations for a decade. I knew what normal looked like, and this wasn't it. Pull every transaction over $50,000 for the past 12 months, I said. Cross-reference with actual delivery confirmations and vendor contracts. I want to see every invoice, every purchase order, every receiving document. James blinked. That's going to be thousands of transactions. Then we'd better get started. It took 4 days of 18-hour workdays, but we found it. $2.7 million in fraudulent transactions over 11 months. Payments to shell companies that didn't exist. Consulting fees to firms with no employees. Equipment purchases that were never delivered. And and every single transaction had been approved by the same person, David Chen, senior accounting manager, 22 years with Sterling Logistics, Melanie's college roommate's husband. I had James pull every email David had sent in the past year. It took 3 hours to find the smoking gun, a message to a Gmail account that wasn't in the corporate directory. Approved the Harbor Consulting payment. $180K clearing tomorrow. Casey says thanks. Casey. Kevin Chen? No, too obvious. I pulled up Kevin's LinkedIn profile. His middle name was Christopher. Kevin Christopher Reed. Casey, my ex-husband. Melanie had been using company funds to bankroll Kevin's construction company. My money had built his business, and then her money had expanded it. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The nausea hit me like a wave. I forced it down. Get me everything, I told James. Every transaction David Chen approved in the past 18 months. Every email. Every phone record the company has legal access to. I want his entire digital footprint. Are we bringing in legal? James asked. Not yet. First, I want to know how deep this goes. The answer was very deep. By the end of week 2, I'd traced $4.1 million in fraudulent transactions. David Chen wasn't working alone. He had help from 2 other accounting managers and someone in procurement. All of them had personal connections to either Melanie or Kevin. They'd built a pipeline to funnel Sterling Logistics money directly into Reed Construction Solutions, disguising it as legitimate business expenses. The construction company Kevin had built with my money was now being sustained by stolen money from Alexander Sterling's company. It was almost impressive. Almost. I compiled everything into a single file. Transaction logs, email threads, bank records, vendor contracts that didn't match delivery receipts, a complete paper trail that would make any prosecutor salivate. Then I walked into Alexander's office without knocking. He looked up from a contract he'd been reviewing, one eyebrow raised. I found it, I said, dropping the file on his desk. All of it. He opened the file, read in silence for 3 minutes straight. When he looked up, his eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. How much? He asked. $4.1 million over 18 months, funneled directly to Reed Construction Solutions through shell companies and fake vendors. David Chen coordinated everything, but he had help from at least 3 other employees. Names? I listed them. Alexander wrote each one down in neat, precise handwriting. What do you want to do? He asked. It was a test. I knew it was a test. Legally, we report them to the authorities, I said. File a complaint with the Manhattan DA's office. Provide all evidence. Let the criminal justice system handle it. But, Alexander prompted, but I want them to know exactly who caught them. Alexander's smile was razor thin. So do I. We scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. Department-wide finance review. Mandatory attendance. I sent the calendar invite myself, copying every employee in the finance department. David Chen confirmed his attendance within 20 minutes. So did the others. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I wore a black suit, not for mourning, but for war. The conference room on 43 seated 30 people. 27 finance department employees filed in, looking nervous. Mandatory meetings with the new CFO weren't usually good news. I waited until everyone was seated. Then I started the presentation. Thank you all for coming, I said, voice pleasant, professional. I wanted to update everyone on the comprehensive financial audit I've been conducting since joining Sterling Logistics 2 weeks ago. David Chen sat in the middle row. He looked relaxed, confident. That was about to change. During my review, I identified several concerning patterns in our transaction history, I continued, clicking to the first slide. Specifically, payments to vendors that don't appear to have fulfilled their contractual obligations. I pulled up the first example. $180,000 to Harbor Consulting for Maritime Logistics Optimization. Harbor Consulting, LLC was registered in Delaware 18 months ago, I explained. According to state records, it has no employees, no office, and no web presence. Yet we paid them $180,000 for services that were never documented. David's face had gone pale. The payment was approved by Senior Accounting Manager David Chen, I continued, letting my eyes land on him, which seemed unusual since vendor payments over $100,000 typically require CFO approval. I clicked to the next slide. This pattern repeated itself across multiple vendors: Pacific Maritime Solutions, Eastern Seaboard Consulting, Harbor Equipment Leasing, all shell companies, all payments approved by the same person. Now wait a minute, David started to stand. Sit down, Mr. Chen, I said, voice hard as steel. I'm not finished, he sat. In total, I've identified $1 million in fraudulent transactions over the past 18 months, I said. All payments were funneled through shell companies and ultimately deposited into accounts controlled by Reed Construction Solutions. I clicked to the next slide. A photo of Kevin, pulled from Reed Construction's website. Reed Construction Solutions is owned by Kevin Reed, I said, my ex-husband. The room went dead silent. The scheme was coordinated by David Chen, I continued, pulling up the emails, with assistance from Linda Park, Thomas Wu, and Sandra Mitchell. All 4 employees will be terminated immediately, and all evidence has been forwarded to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. David stood again. This is insane. You can't prove any of this. I pulled up his email to the Gmail account, projected it on the screen for everyone to see, approved the Harbor Consulting payment, $180K clearing tomorrow. Casey says thanks. Casey, I said, Kevin Christopher Reed. Your messages to him span 11 months. Would you like me to read more of them? David's face went from pale to gray. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the building, I continued. You'll be allowed to collect personal items from your desks under supervision. Your corporate accounts have been frozen, and your access to all systems has been been revoked. I looked at Linda, Thomas, and Sandra in turn. All three looked like they were going to be sick. Anyone else involved in this scheme has until 5 p.m. today to come forward voluntarily, I said. After that, I'll assume my investigation is complete and proceed accordingly. I closed my laptop. Meeting adjourned. Security escorted all 4 of them out within 15 minutes. The rest of the finance department sat frozen, staring at me like I'd just executed someone in front of them. Maybe I had. Catherine Morris was waiting in my office when I returned. The DA's office called, she said. They want to meet tomorrow morning to review the evidence. They sound very interested. Good, I said. David Chen's already lawyered up, so have the others. Expected. Catherine studied me for a long moment. You enjoyed that, she said. It wasn't a question. No, I said honestly. But I didn't hate it either. She almost smiled. Alexander wants to see you. His office. I found Alexander standing at his window, looking out over Manhattan like a general surveying a battlefield he'd just won. The DA's office is moving forward, I said. They'll likely file charges by end of week. Good. He didn't turn around. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. They will be. $4.1 million in wire fraud is a federal offense. They're looking at significant prison time. And Kevin? Alexander asked. He received stolen money. Whether he knew it was stolen is going to be the question. His lawyers will argue he thought they were legitimate consulting contracts. Can we prove otherwise? I pulled out my phone, showed him the screenshot I'd found buried in David Chen's email archives. An email from Kevin to David. Make sure these look legitimate. Use different vendor names each time. We can't have a pattern. Alexander's smile was cold and satisfied. That should do it, he said. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office filed charges 3 days later. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering. All 4 Sterling Logistics employees were arrested at their homes. Kevin was arrested at a construction site in Williamsburg, taken out in handcuffs in front of his entire crew. The story made the New York Post the next day. Shipping magnate's ex-wife used company funds to bankroll lover's business. Melanie's name was in the headline. She released a statement through her lawyers denying any knowledge of the scheme, claimed she'd been deceived by David Chen, an old friend she'd trusted too much. Nobody believed her. Her attorney called Alexander's office 6 times in 2 days. Catherine refused every call. On day 7, Melanie showed up at Sterling Logistics herself. I was in my office reviewing Q3 projections when my assistant buzzed. Mrs. Melanie Sterling is here to see you, she said, voice carefully neutral. She doesn't have an appointment. Send her in, I said. Melanie walked in wearing Chanel and desperation in equal measure. She looked thinner than she had at the cafe. Tired. The kind of tired that comes from realizing you've lost a war you didn't know you were fighting. You, she said, voice shaking with rage. You destroyed my life. I'm sorry, I said, voice pleasant. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Ava Sterling, Chief Financial Officer of Sterling Logistics. Don't play games with me, Melanie hissed. You know exactly who I am. Ah, yes, I said. Melanie Sterling. Sorry, Melanie Reed? Or is it still Sterling? I lose track of these things. Her hands clenched into fists. Kevin is going to prison because of you, she said. David is going to prison. All of them. You're destroying innocent people. Innocent, I repeated. They stole $4.1 million. That's not what innocent means. It was a loan. Kevin was going to pay it back. A loan, I said slowly, from my husband's company, without my husband's knowledge or approval, using fraudulent vendor accounts and shell companies. That's called theft, Mrs. Reed. You did this because you're bitter, Melanie said, voice rising. Because Kevin chose me over you. I stood up, walked around my desk until I was standing directly in front of her. Kevin didn't choose you, I said quietly. He chose my money. Then he chose Alexander's money. You were just the vehicle he used to access both. Melanie's face went white. You should leave, I continued. Security is already on their way. You think you've won? Melanie said, backing toward the door. You think marrying Alexander makes you untouchable, but you're just like me. Another woman bought and paid for. No, I said. I'm the woman holding the receipts. Security escorted her from the building 2 minutes later. I sat back down at my desk and returned to my Q3 projections like nothing had happened. The trial began 6 months later. I testified on day 3, spent 4 hours on the stand explaining transaction flows and shell company structures, and exactly how David Chen had used his access to Sterling Logistics systems to funnel money to Kevin Reed. Kevin's lawyer tried to make me look vindictive, tried to suggest I'd fabricated evidence to hurt my ex-husband, but I'm a CPA. I don't fabricate evidence. I follow the money. And the money told a story even Kevin's 800-an-hour defense attorney couldn't spin. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Guilty on all counts. David Chen got 6 years. The other 3 Sterling employees got between 3 and 5 years each. Kevin got 8 years for conspiracy and money laundering. Melanie was never charged. The DA's office couldn't prove she'd known about the scheme, despite my conviction that she'd orchestrated the whole thing. But her reputation was destroyed. She'd lost her divorce settlement in the litigation. Alexander's lawyers had successfully argued that her connection to the fraud voided the asset division agreement. She'd lost her social standing, her friends, her name. She'd lost everything that mattered to her, just like I had, except I'd built something new. I ran into Alexander in his office the day after the verdict. He was drinking scotch, which was unusual for 3 p.m. on a Thursday. Congratulations, he said, pouring a second glass and sliding it across his desk to me. They were guilty, I said. No congratulations necessary. Still, he raised his glass. To justice. I picked up the glass but didn't drink. What happens now? I asked. Now? Alexander leaned back in his chair. Now you continue being the best CFO Sterling Logistics Logistics has ever had. We've had 2 record quarters since you took over. The board loves you. And the marriage? I asked. It was the first time either of us had acknowledged that our arrangement was exactly that, an arrangement. Alexander studied me for a long moment. That's up to you, he said finally. The prenup we signed gives you an out after 18 months. No penalty. You'd leave with a settlement of $5 million and full credit for the work you've done here. I'd forgotten about the prenup. Signed it the same day as the marriage license, barely reading it because my brain had been focused on the audit, on finding the evidence, on destruction. Or, Alexander continued, you stay, continue as CFO. We remain married on paper and live separately as we have been. You'd have full autonomy, full authority, and a seat on the board. Why would you want that? I asked. Because you're good at this, he said simply. Because the company is better with you in it, and because neither of us is interested in the complications of another divorce. I thought about Kevin, about the decade I'd spent building his dream, about coming home to an empty brownstone that had never actually been mine. I thought about this office, about the satisfaction of catching thieves, about the authority to actually fix things instead of just documenting the problems. I thought about who I'd been before Kevin, ambitious, focused, unwilling to settle. I thought about who I'd become after, harder, colder, but sharper too. I want a real seat on the board, I said, not just advisory, full voting rights. Alexander's smile was genuine this time. Done. And I want the Park Slope brownstone. He raised an eyebrow. Kevin's house? The one he legally stole from you? It's going to be seized as proceeds of crime, I said. I want Sterling Logistics to purchase it at auction. Then I want you to deed it to me personally. Why? Alexander asked. Because it was mine first, I said, and I want it back. Alexander picked up his phone, typed something, put it down. My attorney will handle it, he said. Anything else? I drained the scotch. It burned going down, but in a good way. That's all. Then we have a deal, Mrs. Sterling. I left his office and went back to work. 3 months later, I got the keys to the Park Slope brownstone. The locks had been changed. Kevin's belongings had been cleared out. The marble island in the kitchen was exactly as I remembered it. I walked through the empty rooms I'd painted, floors I'd chosen, windows I'd measured for curtains I'd never gotten to buy, and felt absolutely nothing. This house wasn't my dream anymore. It was just real estate. I hired a property manager and put it up for rent at $8,500 a month, at least in 3 days to a couple with twin babies and more money than sense. The rental income went straight into an investment account I'd opened in my name only. I bought a loft in Tribeca instead. 1,800 square feet of exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Hudson River. No memories, no ghosts, just mine. Alexander and I had dinner once a month, business dinners where we discussed company strategy and quarterly projections and whether to expand into Southeast Asian markets. We were cordial, professional. We respected each other's boundaries and never pretended to be something we weren't. It wasn't a marriage in any traditional sense, but it worked. 2 years after Kevin went to prison, I got a letter. It was forwarded through my attorney's office. Inmates weren't allowed to have my direct address. The handwriting was Kevin's, still confident despite the circumstances. Dear Ava, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I wanted you to know that I never meant for things to end the way they did. I loved you. I really did. I just got caught up in something bigger than both of us. Melanie convinced me it was all legal. She said her husband owed her, that she was just taking what was rightfully hers. I didn't know it was fraud. I swear I didn't know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that, but I wanted you to know that what we had was real. At least it was real for me. I hope you're doing okay. Kevin. I read it twice. Then I fed it into my office shredder and watched it turn into confetti. Some investments can't be recovered. You just write them off and move on. 5 years after I married Alexander Sterling in an 11-minute ceremony at the Manhattan Marriage Bureau, Sterling Logistics went public. The IPO raised $2.3 billion. My shares, granted as part of my board compensation, were worth $47 million on paper. I was 37 years old. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile piece, How Ava Sterling Became One of New York's Most Powerful CFOs. They called me a savant, a corporate crusader, a woman who'd risen from nothing to build an empire. They had no idea I'd actually fallen from everything and clawed my way back up from the ashes. But that was fine. Let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth. The truth was that Kevin Reed had stolen my 20s and my savings and my faith in love, and I'd stolen everything back, plus interest. The truth was that I'd married a stranger for revenge and discovered I was better at being ruthless than I'd ever been at being soft. The truth was that the best decision I ever made was saying yes to a man I didn't love in order to destroy the man I did. The truth was that I didn't need saving. I just needed access to the accounts. And once I had that, I burned their entire world down with nothing but spreadsheets and receipts. They underestimated me because I'd been kind. They forgot that kindness is a choice, not a weakness. And I chose to stop being kind the moment they chose to steal from me. Kevin got out of prison after serving 6 years. I heard through my attorney that he'd moved to New Jersey, was working construction again under someone else's name, rebuilding a life from nothing. Exactly where I'd started after he destroyed mine. Poetic, really. Melanie disappeared from New York society entirely. Last I heard, she was living in Miami, married to a real estate developer who didn't know about her past. Good luck to him. As for me, I'm still Ava Sterling, still CFO of Sterling Logistics, still married to Alexander in name only, still living in my Tribeca loft with its river views and absence of memories. I date occasionally. Nothing serious. Nothing that requires trust. I'm not sure sure I have that anymore, but I have something better. I have power, I have respect. I have a brownstone in Park Slope generating $102,000 a year in rental income. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that the man who tried to erase me is now living the life I built for him. Broke, starting over, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a criminal record. He thought he could take everything from me. He was wrong. I took it back, plus interest. If you made it this far, you understand something important. The best revenge isn't violence or anger or dramatic confrontation. The best revenge is competence. The best revenge is building something so successful that your enemies can only watch from a distance while you thrive. The best revenge is becoming the person they never thought you could be. I'm not the woman Kevin married anymore. I'm better, harder, richer, free, and he lost everything he stole from me, even his name. That's not anger, that's accounting. And the books are finally balanced.